Welcome back. Let's dive into Maintenance Windows and Change Calendar. Now I'm going to do this a little out of order from what you see on the screen, but I just think it will flow a little bit better for you and allow you to comprehend it a little bit quicker if I do it in this order. So I want to talk about Maintenance Windows first. Now, Maintenance Windows allow us to create a schedule for when potentially disruptive actions occur. So that can be patching, reboots, etc. So what I do is I go in to create a maintenance window. We give it a name and a description. We can allow this maintenance window to be used for tasks on targets that are not registered with it. So we'll leave that checked. And then we create a schedule. So we can specify a cron, we can set it to rate, or we can set our own via a string expression. So a cron or a rate, but defined via a string. So what I'll do is I'm going to run rate. I'll set it to 30 minutes. And right now, this is the minimum that you can set. And then we can specify how long our window lasts. So how long of a gap or how big of a gap do we want to allow these tasks to occur? So I'll give it a 1 hour window, but you can do 1 to 24. Now we can also stop initiating tasks at a certain point before the window closes. So we can do up to 23 hours before the window closes or 0. So I'll leave it at 0 for now. And then we can move on to our start and end date. So if we wanted to, we could specify a defined start and a defined end so we know when it starts and when it will stop. Now, typically, maintenance windows don't need Windows start or end dates, as you usually continually patch and perform maintenance on all of your workloads. But if you have a special use case, AWS allows you to specify a specific start and a specific end where it will no longer occur. And when you do this, you need to schedule your time zone for your start and dates if you want them relative to your current one. We can add our tags, but I'm going to create our maintenance window. There you go. We have our window. We just created it. And that's how easy it is to create a maintenance window with specific settings that allow us to define when we want to have interruptible tasks be performed. You'll see we have a tasks section. So how many tasks have been assigned to this window? We can have a history of when it was executed. And you can see just now it said, hey, I have no tasks to execute, but it was successful. So let's actually view these details. And you'll just see it gives you a unique ID, the window that was occurring, and then the start and end time. So if I go back, I go to targets. This is where we can register targets for this maintenance window. So if I click register target, we can specify a name if we want. So let's just say EC2. We can give it a description and owner information. So these are the details that allow us to quickly identify what this window target is. Now, the bottom part allows us to actually specify targets. So what resources do we want to target? Most of the time, people really only think that you can target instances in EC2, but you can actually support other systems manager commands, so run commands and workflows of automation. You can target Lambda functions and step functions. So this is actually a very customizable piece built into Systems Manager. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and choose a resource group. And this is where we can specify those resource groups that we created earlier in this module, and we can select what instances we want, or resource types, I should say. Now I'm just going to do an EC2 instance, but this allows you hopefully to connect the dots and see how we can utilize resource groups, place them into a specific maintenance window based on this target details setup, and then we can run commands at scheduled times. So you'll see we have 2 targets right now, and that's because I have 2 instances with the tags that group them into our resource group that we made. So now what this does is it allows us to schedule automation based around this maintenance window and perform things like patching or reboots. and we'll get into patching a little bit later on. So with maintenance window out of the way, let's go ahead and go to change calendar. Now change calendar is exactly what it sounds like. It allows us to set up dates and time ranges for when actions can or cannot be performed. So this is very useful for administrators that have to perform tasks at certain times. Change calendars are extremely common in enterprise environments. So let's just go ahead and create one. We give it a name, we can give it a description, and then we choose the type of calendar we want. Now there's open by default, so what this does is it allows any actions to be ran except within our window that we define, or we can have closed by default. And what this does is it's going to block any actions that occur outside of our change calendar that we specify. Now, I have been a part of companies that do it both ways. It really just depends on your enterprise and your customer impact that you have. In certain industries, they know specific dates that they don't want things to occur, like holidays, for example. So open by default might be a better option for this, as you specify the event windows where you do not want things to occur. And then there's closed by default that's useful for more strict or stringent enterprises that really require specific timing for implementing changes. So I'll choose closed by default. And there we go. We now have our calendar. So if I open up our change calendar, well, it's just a calendar, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. So this allows us to create events based on dates and times for our AWS account. So if I create an event here, let's call this prod patching. We can specify the start date. So let's just pick a random date here. We'll do the 11th, and then we'll end on the 15th. So we're going to allow patching throughout that business week. Now, if we want, we can set this to recurring. So we can set it weekly, daily, yearly, etc. And then with that, we can actually go ahead and set an until date or a number of occurrences specifically to what we want. Now I'm going to uncheck this. I'm going to create our scheduled event. And just like that, we created our change calendar maintenance window or change period that can tie in to our maintenance windows and other tasks. So what we would have to do here is under details, you'll see that we do have to add a required step for our automation purposes. You'll see they provide it here, and what we would do is add this to the document, and again, we'll discuss documents a little bit later on in depth. But what this does is it's going to get that calendar state whenever an automation runs. It's going to see if the calendar is open or closed for that date, and then it will either execute or break out and not execute, all based on our change calendar that we just defined here. So right now, if I executed something and we had this dependency on this change calendar, it would not work because we're not in our open period that we defined here on the week of the 10th. Now, one last feature here is we can actually share this with other accounts. So if you have a master account for operations and administration, you can set the calendar there and then share it out across your org. This really allows for better compliancy and management of your changes. So to wrap this up really quick, we created a maintenance window which defined a period of time where we want to allow maintenance tasks to be enabled and work. In that maintenance window, we registered our prod resource group targets, specifically EC2 instances. We defined a change calendar where we specified a specific time where actions can be performed. And how we would tie this all together is we would add that detailed dependency in our automation documents that we create. And then when they're executing with our maintenance window, it would check the current state of our calendar. That seems like a pretty good stopping point. What we'll do is we'll wrap up here, and then coming up next, we're going to start diving into instances and nodes, and we're going to explore these different capabilities in there.